Hey guys, I thought I would do another video, and I felt that towards the end of the last week I've kind of missed out quite a big one in discussing landscape. I just felt it deserved a video in its own right. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time on talking about this concept landscape, because I feel that it's something that theatre makers and sometimes theatre academics use the term landscape quite flippantly, without really trying to pick apart what we mean by landscape when we use it in relation to the work that we're talking about, or in relation to the work that we're making. And I've kind of done quite a lot of research in relation to landscape, and really looking at what a landscape is and what it means. I suppose if we're going to talk about landscape, or the original sort of main connotations that come to mind, I think, instantly when we say what is a landscape, is usually, I suppose, a topography, a kind of horizon view of things, you know, as if you're standing on top of a hill and you're looking over that, and that's a landscape. And if that's what it is, then I think that we use landscape sort of wrongly quite a lot of the time. So I'm just trying to pick apart whether that is really what we mean, and give you some information about what some cultural geographers and social theorists have had to say on landscape. So I just thought I'd give this video, you know, its own space, basically, so that we can really get to grips with this in more detail. So I thought it might be useful to have a look at the etymology. That means the history of the word landscape, and see what that reveals. So Mark Antrop, who's an academic currently working looking at landscape and looking at definitions of landscape, he cites that it was really in the early 13th century that this term we can really trace the term landscape back to in a word landskap, which referred to land region or environment. Now his paper, A Brief History of Landscape Research, which is really recent, it's done in 2013, he discusses the roots of the word, and he states that landscape related to the word, and we pick it apart into its different suffixes. Land, meaning a bordered territory, but the suffix skep referred to land reclamation and creation, which also ties in, also at the same time, in Germanic languages, to Landschaft, schaffen, to make. So, I mean, there's that, but there's also sort of there's roots. It can be argued that if we look back at the sort of ancient Greek verb skopen, which means behold, contemplate, examine, or inspect, might be a possible sort of etymological root that we might consider if we're looking at it. So either the Germanic languages, which has this mix between sort of region and creation of land, or the Greek, which is sort of to observe and to see. So either way, it's generally accepted though that the word landscape really became common in the English vernacular through the popularity of 17th century Dutch painting, which is probably, and it referred to, I mean, it came into our language because we started to talk about landscape paintings. These beautiful Dutch landscape paintings are amazing, aren't they? That sort of thing, you see. So I think from the very beginning, sort of thought of landscape as being an image, a picture, you know, framed of the land, basically. And so that's, and the thing about it is that obviously as time's gone on, there has been greater attention given to landscape as a concept or an idea, or the study of landscape. How do we study landscapes? What is it? What does it mean to study a landscape? Okay. John Wiley is basically a very prominent academic in landscape studies within the sort of cultural geography realm. He wrote the book Landscape, so I would definitely go and read that textbook. It's a fantastic resource if you're really wanting to look into much deeper into this sort of concept. He stated that the study of landscape has been dominated for much of its history by particular epistemologies, which build on the idea of landscape as something seen from a fixed singular viewpoint. So again, that brings it back to this idea that landscape is something which is observed, which we look at. Just like those Dutch landscape paintings, it's something that we sort of see from afar. And that therefore the kind of way the academic realm of the study of landscapes was predominantly about employed methods of observation. So it really meant that there was a whole load of academics in the field, or in fields, basically looking at land from a distance and kind of trying to quantify it in various ways through observation. So to put this into context, you might want to go up on a hill and look at the M8 coming into Glasgow and count the amount of red cars coming into the city, and then quantify that data and sort of write up a report, and that would provide some sort of sense of what the landscape is, because you'd be able to talk about the different colours of cars that are used there, for example. I mean, that's very basic, but you could talk about that in terms of the movement of sheep across the moor, or you could talk about it in relation to all these things. Either way, it's positioning yourself as a fixed viewpoint, staring at this sort of land in front of you and sort of recording the details that happen there. And I suppose there are still probably some elements of cultural geography which still do this kind of almost positivist sort of methodology. The problem with this though is that it kind of is predicated on this idea of a kind of fixed image, or a kind of a single view of what the land is. And the problem is that can't possibly account for the multiple ways that landscape is perceived or experienced by different people who sort of live and work there. Wiley states that landscapes can be understood as, and I quote, the product of interactions between sets of cultural conditions, weather, rain, soil type, resources, etc., and sets of cultural practices. And that might be agricultural practices, religious or spiritual beliefs, shared values and behavioural norms, the organisation of society vis-a-vis gender roles, property ownership, and so on. Okay, so the multitude of variable relationships and experiences that a landscape can afford to an individual makes it incredibly difficult to argue for an idea of a fixed representation, or the analysis of landscape from a single fixed viewpoint whereby we try and quantify it by what we see in front of us. And